The brothers WISP. The brothers WISP, brothers WISP. The brothers WISP. The brothers.
You're now listening to
Hey everybody,
Greg. It's the
this is Greg of the Brothers
Whisp.
WISP number 149. I am here in College Station, Texas, as per the usual. I have one new face, one returning face. Well, actually two returning faces. I say one is new because we haven't seen him in about a year and a half, give or take, but it's always such a pleasure. Well, you know, honestly, this individual overfills your cup so much that, you know, it takes a little while before you exhaust it all. So he's here just in the nick of time to give us a refill. And that would be one Tom Smyth you're from Kentucky, right? The Kentucky accent?
Definitely. No, I'd be Ross Craig County Tipperary in the best country in the world. That is Ireland. Of course, you know. But,
everybody knows the best
shout out to all
country
the
in the
people
world is
second best
Texas.
country in the world, United States. You know, or you know, I suppose with the European team, I should really put you at the number 20, 28 or 29. You know, but with the member states of the EU. But no, it's great to be back, guys. And sorry, I've been busy. It's been busy this side of the pond, COVID and all that. So I did miss you all, and a lot's happened since we were last talking. And Greg, I really appreciate all the work you and the guys, Mike, have been doing. It's really awesome, and thanks for having me back.
All we've been doing is slagging you off for the last year and a half. So I'm glad that you appreciate our efforts.
Oh, well, if you know, it's the water off a duck's arse, you know.
All right. We also have him with us, Collin Z, Collin Zapalak, right? Isn't that how I say it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When I say it that way, I always think it sounds Czech to me, Zapalak.
I think Thomas would know this one better, but I think it's an Americanized form of Zapalovac or something like that. Of course, family's been here for over 100 years. So.
That's another fellow Texan from the greatest country on earth, Texas.
I like that.
All right, so
you mentioned that. I remember something. Maybe it was 6-7 years ago now, where they put all the cotton producing countries from production highest to lowest, and the one I was reading, they actually split out Texas. Texas was number 4 in the world.
Baller, man. I think at one point we exported a whole lot of rice compared to some other places as well, which kind of surprised me. I never thought of us as rice growers down here, but we do everything. Supposedly we're one of the few states, we allow ourselves to be states. One of the few states that is kind of standalone. So if you kind of carved us off, our economy would stand on its own, our power grid, everything. We sort of separate but equal, I guess.
As long as all the power plants are up and running and not doing not going through natural gas conversions.
Shortages. It'll be fun. I got myself a battery backup this year for the shenanigans that I assume will ensue. But let's get the vegetables out of the way so we can get to the dessert. So we have a couple of sponsors. No patrons this go around. No new patrons, I should say. And that's patreon.com/brotherswisp. That way you get access to the patron-only Slack and become one of the little brothers in arms. You got to get the official tattoo. We do it by taking a coat hanger. We bend it in a specific way, heat it up on the stove, and then we just kind of shove it into your arm. So it's not necessarily pleasant. And it's odd to think you would pay us for the privilege, but people are lining up to do it, so be it. But we do have some sponsors aside from that. We are brought to you by Sonar, a scalable, intuitive, and comprehensive ISP operational and billing support system. Learn more at Sonar.Software. Also, TowerCoverage.com, the guys with the longest copy to read. Tower Coverage is your RF propagation system to empower your network, real-time data metrics, enable your coverage area, reaching your customer base, and more. The industry's best RF propagation mapping system allows website integration for customer sign-up and pre-qualification. Use this data to scientifically plan network expansion and help your WISP succeed. Get a free trial today at towercoverage.com. Smith, do you have tower coverage maps over there, or is that just U.S.? I didn't know if they went all the way over there.
I think the US have more accurate. The last time I was using Tower coverage. It was more accurate in the United States, I think, because it's a privilege afforded to U.S. citizens for firing up all those rockets into space. I think you get but it's been improving. General the coverage in Ireland has been improved, and Europe generally. And the EU has some open data directives, which is kind of nice. So they're kind of encouraging governments that, if they commission a LiDAR survey, that survey data must be open sourced. And so that's a very positive thing. So you get that 1 meter resolution LiDAR kind of type topography. So, but yeah, it's improving. It traditionally was poor, but I think it was a global issue, so it was the United States and then the rest of the world. But I think also with the kind of democratization of space or commercialization from Elon Musk and all those people that, with all those launches, Ariane 5 and all that, I think the coverage, geospatial data available is improving. And obviously, you don't just have the geospatial data, you have obviously private LiDAR surveys available, but the data for them tends to be expensive, I have to say. So I think it's something that I'd like to see more movement on globally to make that even more accessible. One of the topics we might be talking about later on, but yeah, so I've used tower coverage. I think it's very good. I've also used Wisdom and stuff like that from other, there's from Dave Birds, and there's obviously we've played Radio Mobile. Do you remember back in the day? And I think trying to load up. I remember actually downloading those SRTM files and trying to make head nor tail of them. So that was the shuttle radar topography mission. And
the last one they took was the last shuttle mission, and I know they did 3-degree arcs for the entire world and 1-degree arcs for the U.S. or North America, I guess, or the U.S.
I think it was 1 arc second, and you were 0.3 arc second. I think you were even more high resolution, which I was jealous of. I think you do have it for the rest of the world. You just haven't given it to us yet. So Uncle Sam, come on, get the finger out, give it back, give us the data.
Yeah, I know. I was playing with kind of the successor to Splat not too long ago, and it was capable of using LiDAR, which Splat was only SRTM. So
yeah. The LiDAR data, and I think, like in fairness, when I look at tower coverage, and in fairness also, like any, radio tool, you find that the quality of data in the US cities is quite, I think it's spectacular will be probably a good way of describing it. You can actually see the resolution. That said, at home, when we started looking at it, like we did a mapping project for the National Broadband Plan, 2019. It's almost 3 years ago now. And that data was quite expensive. Like, so to me to cover my area, to get the high resolution 1 meter resolution data for me as a company on my own for just 20,000 square kilometers, I think it was or something like that. It was like $100,000 for me alone. So it was quite expensive, and so what we ended up doing was pooling together 29 ISPs, doing a kind of a group project to jointly purchase the data for like a 6-month window, and then do our analysis and submit it to the government. Which they dutifully just ignored. We're moving swiftly on, but still, the LiDAR, when you actually saw it like put into the GIS system, it was quite impressive. Like you could actually see, like in Ireland, we've quite pretty hedgerows. So we've rolling hills, and you have all these hedgerows, and sometimes you can see, like we have these things from Celtic tradition, like ringfort rats, which are like it'd be like let's say a prehistoric kind of type of castle. So it's like a moat, and but you can actually see the outlines of those in the actual topography data. So you can see these rigs and trees. There was bad luck to walk through them. You had to walk around them. But the reason why it was bad luck, it was just sometimes there'd be a burial site, and so you could actually just break your leg going down through a hole. So it was more to have a practical reason rather than which became superstition. But that's I digress actually. It's a habit, but yeah, no, the GIS stuff. Yeah, I'd like to see more improvement of it around. In fairness, I think Europe, EU are trying to move that in that direction with the open data directive, which is very positive, and we would like to see more of that. Democratization of data that's really useful particularly for innovative technologies like fixed wireless. In addressing the digital divide. That's what you guys do in rural America. Sometimes with the help of Uncle Sam, and sometimes despite Uncle Sam, so it's. And I think we have the same similar issues over in Ireland, or it's across the world, So.
Yeah, we've had a distinct lack of European representation lately, so I'm very curious to hear about how things are going these days. So you had a very specific reason you wanted to comment, and so I wanted to make sure that we gave ample time to that. So fire away, give us the intro on what you're interested in communicating.
So for anyone who's based in Europe or in the European Union, or the free trade area as well, so Norway, Switzerland as well will be covered under it. So there's state aid guidelines for broadband, and the rapid rollout of broadband networks in Europe is being updated at the moment. And there's a 12-week consultation period that started on the 19th of November, or unofficially started because they're waiting for the translation into all the different EU languages. The official, let's say, the draft legal text is in English, and that'll be and so it's up on the Commission website, the DG Competition, the Director General of Competition website, and effectively these rules are the rules in which national governments or member states of the Union can actually legally intervene in a market to achieve a political objective. So, for instance, for our friends across the pond, the EU basically, it's a very rules-based system, which is very welcome. I know that the likes of Trump and Farage, sometimes criticize the Brussels and the Commission for being very bureaucratic, but the reality is very different. It's a rules-based system, and generally the rules are quite logical, and certainly the Commission have put an awful lot of effort, it looks like, into these rules. And for me, as a small business trying to grapple with them and the European treaties, and I've been doing it for the last, I suppose, 3 years now at this stage, you kind of get to know what, when you start reading them the first time, and when you start to actually understand what the rules are. So they're trying to codify how they implement a political objective, So, and what's really nice about that, and where I think Farage and the likes of Trump are wrong, is that, a lot of rules and policies have a certain objective, and there's a reason for it, and there's a scientific reason for it. It's not just, and I criticise Farage because the impact of what Brexit has done in let's say in the island of Ireland and the rest of Europe, it's been an unwelcome distraction, and it's because of, on the one hand, criticising rules and facts, and then on the other hand, kind of selling a false promise on the other side. So it's kind of frustrating. But when you actually look at these rules, the state aid rules, it's really important that the small businesses that might be affected by them try to seek to understand them, and then to engage with the Commission and their member state on how best to implement them. Because so the objective from the Commission's point of view, from the member states' point of view, so this would have come from the European Parliament and the Council and various consultations, is they want a gigabit in every home in the European Union by the end of the decade. They want a minimum of 100 megs download speed, and upgradable to a gigabit by 2025. So that's a fairly big target, The last time they revised these rules was in 2013, and the current benchmark at that time, which is currently in effect, was a 30 meg, a call to get 30 megs down, 6 megs up to every household in the European Union, and half of the households getting at least 100 megabits download speed. So this revision is obviously to change the rules so as to accommodate the political objectives as mandated by citizens and consultation. So it is important. And I suppose the impact to small businesses who've entered in to the market could be significant. So if you're a small business who's set up a wireless network, so if the question is, are you invested in the technology that could scale up to that and meet that standard? So there's a lot of positives in it. There's a lot of challenges in it. So also, I would say that the previous guidelines, there was probably wiggle room for member states to, I suppose, how would I put it, run a consultation to achieve a particular objective. So they could put arbitrary kind of, if I was to be, I suppose, blunt, I would say Jimmy Crow type laws or rules. So they'd say, oh, you're a fixed wireless network. Well, can you do this? And then you do all that, and then they go, but can you do this other thing? And they can actually technically rule you out for things like, I'd be probably a bit facetious, but oh well, you didn't declare how much holy water you put on your base station, so therefore you don't qualify as NGA. Now that's probably a bit harsh, but certainly they could introduce, or certainly that was our experience anyway, in the consultation, is that you try to meet their standards in a very short period of time, and then you'd be kind of rejected after a particular date when you couldn't really, when it was almost too late to do anything, and that's quite frustrating. So the new rules that the Commission are putting out there would do address some of those issues. So they address the likes of, they codify the mapping process. So one of the things about the state aid rules, I suppose, if I was to be, one of the things, so state aid is the crown jewels in the European Union is the internal market, as we call it. So the European market, 500 million people, it's probably the predominant kind of gravitational pull for a member state to try and accede to the EU is to actually access that market. And of course, with that market comes conditions. So in terms of Brexit, the British wanted to leave the internal market because of the rules, but they wanted to still access the internal market without the rules. Bluntly speaking, that's what what happened.
Have their cake and eat it too, sooner.
Exactly. And the problem is, of course, the EU were like, so you want to leave the club, but you want to have it still member. You don't want to pay the membership. You still want to be. You still want all the benefits. Okay, leave that with us. So it's been, and it's quite difficult. But the key thing, I suppose, is this internal market is like the most important aspect, I suppose. And initially it was a European economic community. It was an economic project at first. It's of course expanded to a whole load of other really good social and political ideas as well, which has been very helpful to, certainly as Ireland has benefited as a EU member for, we went from being quite a poor country to being quite a wealthy country. And that's in no small part to the European Union and the principle of solidarity. So when we were poor, bigger countries, actually, provided social funds and structural funds to actually, I suppose, raise the standard of living in Ireland. And now we've come to full circle, and now we're a net contributor to the EU. So we're now contributing to the European budget as opposed to being a net beneficiary. But like over the length of time, it's been quite beneficial for our country, you know. And so basically, getting back to it, so state aid is inherently contrary to the internal market. So they need to have state aid control. So that's the whole. And in part of the European Union is we have. So you have all these things like joint competencies, single competencies, so shared competencies. But in terms of competition state aid, that's exclusively the competence of the European Commission. What that basically means is that when you join the internal market, you do surrender that sovereignty to control your market in your country. It's now a common market, and it's to allow that rules-based system to work. But obviously the problem is that if you don't have state aid, the issue is, as we've seen with privatized networks and all that type of stuff that happened in the 90s, is that you have cities and towns having great broadband, and then the rural, less densely populated parts of the country being neglected from an infrastructure point of view. And of course, that's unacceptable politically. So there was, that digital divide needed to be addressed. So that's where the state aid rules for broadband came in. So the rules are being revised. The rules are being codified to kind of reduce wiggle room, I think would be the best way of describing it. So they're trying to make it more clear so that less stuff is open to interpretation. Like one of the key things with the broadband, if I was to summarize what the broadband guidelines mean, is that you need to measure the problem. So you need to map the area. You need to map your country in terms of broadband capability, and then assess each premises or each area on a premises level and assess whether those businesses in that area and the citizens in that area can get broadband of a certain standard. And then, any business or premises that can't get broadband above a certain standard is then it's okay in principle to now make an intervention of some sort. So like subsidize an open access network to go in and build fiber or fixed wireless. So there's been a number of very successful fixed wireless rollouts, from in Italy. There was a Cambium-based rollout, and in Spain as well, and in the United Kingdom. So in Ireland, for instance, the National Broadband Plan is an intervention, so for about 500,000 homes, businesses, and that was a fibre-based intervention with open access, or that's what it's meant to be anyway. So, but the issue, I suppose, where fixed wireless operators in Ireland would argue that the government never fully mapped and never fully accepted actually our real world capabilities as fixed wireless. So they intervened much wider than we would have thought was necessary. And so they would have overbuilt our networks. So that's an issue. And so the state aid guidelines now being revised is that you have measured the problem, then you have to consult. So when you measure the problem, then you have to push out and say, here's what we propose to do, guys. Here's our map of the intervention area. And then you got to ask the market, is this okay? And then if the market submits mapping data, you need to analyze that mapping data and then give the market feedback on that. And based on those rules, then obviously then you have to design a state aid measure. And so one of the things you do is, so you look at things like, you can enter into, like, for instance, what they call a competitive dialogue, for instance, or you just do a tender and you say, who will cover 100,000 homes and how much per premises, so you can just do a kind of a blind tender, or generally it's a competitive dialogue, with multiple bidders. And so there's obligations on reusing infrastructure that's already existing. There's obligations not to crowd out existing investors. And so what the commissioner did in this new rules is, one, codify the mapping, codify the consultation. And the mapping one, that they have a particular section, which, I think this is certainly I have a huge interest in, and I think any fixed wireless or any network operator would have an interest in, because it codifies the things that the member state should ask you, and also you should provide to the member state when mapping the capabilities in your network. So they talk about different standards. So they talk about like these standards, like in terms of the performance of your network. So are you an ultra high capacity network or very high capacity VHCN? According to the BEREC guidelines, which is like a body of regulators in European regulators. And so there's this document, BEREC BOR 20165. Sorry about that, but it's like they codify what the attributes a very high capacity network should reach. And also they quote the ITU standards for measuring performance of networks. So you've got the ITU 1540 standards for measuring round trip time, bit error rates, packet error rates, and obviously the service availability as well. So there's things like that which are much more helpful, so that you don't have this. It kind of hopefully will reduce the level where where I think potentially abuse can occur, where a member state can create unacceptably high barriers of inverted commas credibility for operators in the market, to just so they say you're all crap because you don't meet this awesome standard that we've set, that no one in industry practically ever sets anyway. With the best, with unlimited resources, and so the codified standards is actually quite useful because at least you know what the rules are.
Let me ask you a question. Let me break in. Take a breath or two, really quick. So you're saying a lot of stuff I don't understand anything you're talking about. So when you have to talk to me like I'm 5. I'm sure Collin totally tracks this, but I've heard you say member state, state aid, state rules. Is this like a government organization that's there in charge of like setting these standards you guys have to meet? Is that the idea?
Sorry, the problem is I had about 3 hours sleep last night, and so I should have led off with that apology first.
No. I know this conversation is more for your European compatriots, right? You're trying to get a message out. I am so lost. I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay, how would I describe it? So the internal market in the EU is controlled by DG Comp, Director General of Competition in Brussels. And so part of being a member of the European Union and having that awesome club of 500 million market is, in order to ensure a level playing field, DG Comp but DG Competition actually sets the rules to make sure that the level playing field is maintained, so that small businesses and big businesses can compete without. And so they have a special. They've quite a lot of powers in terms of managing that and protecting the internal market and the fairness of it.
Okay, so if I want to start a wireless ISP, I have to adhere to whatever rules they set forth. I have to play inside that field.
Yeah. Now, if you were starting an ISP, you're unlikely to. You do have to adhere to the rules, absolutely. But generally, DG Comp it's about dealing with. It's usually dealing with the bigger questions. So. So it's like cartels. It's making sure cartels, making sure there's no collusion in the market. I shouldn't have used the word collusion for the Americans. Sorry, guys.
That's been coming up a lot with my family members lately, so I don't even. Let's not get into that.
You have that. So you'd have all these. So you've all these rules that need to be obeyed. So when you're starting an ISP, obviously you have to deal with your local regulator and stuff like that. But in terms of competition law, really, in terms of the internal market, they're worried about is there price fixings of cartels type stuff. They want to protect against that, but they also want to stop governments because traditionally, you had these unprofitable airlines. I'll give you an example: unprofitable airlines, and so you'd have a local government propping up their national carrier, because every country used to have, oh well, we need to have our flag bearer, we need our flags on the tail of an airplane, flying in and out of our airports, and of course there was some probably pretty poor commercial practice, and there was not. And the issue for that was that if you're in the European Union, is you'd have, let's for instance, a German airline competing against an Irish airline, but the Irish government are propping up the Irish airline so the Irish airline can undercut the German airlines. So they wanted to cut out that crap so that there wasn't a race to the bottom in terms of value for taxpayers. But there was also other benefits to, suddenly you now had the best airlines coming through, the most efficient ones, and the other ones just being dealt with through just the normal capitalists.
So they're,
costs.
a bigger picture, I guess they're there to prevent corruption, kind of thing.
They're there to prevent corruption in the market more so.
Right.
It's what the idea is: just fair play, level playing field, and so for instance, like they would say, state aid is not compatible. But then they go, here's the other problems then that come in. It's like, well, but what happens if, citizens' rights are being impacted because commercial operators aren't stepping up to the plate? And so there's a political imperative now to try and deal with that. And it's a logical, noble one. And then for fairness, it's probably one of the reasons why so many fixed wireless people operate in the United States and even indeed in Ireland. We've about 80 odd operators, there's about 50 fixed wireless operators. That's because we stepped up and innovated where, let's say, the significant market powers, either through contracts or just through finance, weren't willing to innovate or couldn't, they're bigger. It's harder to move such companies, and innovate, while we could turn on a sixpence or a dime, as you might say, across the pond. So we had natural advantages there, and so we've been, I suppose, competing and flourishing in a market where it has been level in some ways, and and I suppose in some ways you could also say that there hasn't been that much competition. That's the other side of it. So the political imperative is to try and improve competition across the market, and where services are below a certain standard, to try and improve that. And so
that's interesting. So to me, and here's just another dumb question, I'm sure. You were saying that the regulators are going to be putting in a plan that you have to get up to a gig. Are they basically saying if you wear the moniker broadband, you have to be able to offer a gig by that time period, regardless of the delivery medium? So they don't, so there's technological neutrality, so they don't really care how you do it as long as you do it. Now there is an expectation that fiber obviously is a very good medium. It's an expensive medium, and the technologies are there. Fixed wireless obviously can do it in certain circumstances as well, and any good decent fixed wireless engineer would understand that you've issues to deal with there in terms of designing your network to actually fulfill that need. And obviously the technology, but giving a gig to every household, that's the benchmark, and so that has to be. I suppose we'd have to put a call out to all the vendors to improve the equipment. That's
that
wild.
Be available on the,
even in fixed base wireless, you guys would have to adhere to being able to, because in a rural area, being able to do that affordably is not exact. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like in a dense urban environment with the technologies we have now, I could see potentially doing it, like with Terragraph stuff or whatever. But if you've got one tower that's servicing 6 people and one of them is 8 miles away, you still have to adhere to delivering that guy a gig. And if, say, for example, you can't do that.
That's where the state aid comes in. Okay. So if it's not possible to do it on a commercial basis, so the call initially, what the commission want to do is it's kind of carrot and stick. What they're saying is, we'll help you, or not the Commission, but the Commission are saying their member states can work with their stakeholders in their area to improve standards of connectivity for their citizenry. And one of the things you can do with that is obviously voucher schemes to improve take-up. You can do certain things like, so free installations or reduced cost installations. So there's different options there. And then there's one, awareness campaigns, like, for instance, small companies mightn't necessarily have the marketing firepower and so a lot of people in rural part of America or Ireland or any part of Europe would have a situation where, you might be operating in really well in a town. You can see this other town, but you don't really have that much contact with them for whatever reason. And you're not, in fairness, I suppose if I was to be critical of myself, I was an engineer who got into business as opposed to being a businessman who's trying to be an engineer. It's kind of, so I went to solve a technical problem in one area. And yeah, I would say that, that my marketing plan mightn't be the most amazing. I need to work on that. But then that requires finance and capital as well. That's the other side of it. And where the local government could probably step in and say, hey guys, can we all just map out who is available, what's available in each area? And so that when people are crying out and saying we don't have broadband, they actually go, well, actually try out this guy. He may be able to help you out, or this girl, So there's that side of it. And so it's a carrot and stick approach in ways. What they're saying is, look, what do you need to get this done? And then the other side of it is, that's the moonshot you need to aim for. And if you can't, then the governments are cleared to intervene in their market as they see fit, with obeying the principles in these broadband guidelines. And some of them are, and like I have to say, they are quite well written. There are there's some vagaries. There are some areas where they may be open to interpretation, and so we need to seek clarification on that. And that's why I suppose I'm putting the call out to my European counterparts, fixed wireless fiber, small providers particularly, to try and engage with this, because this can affect you. There's very good things, like I think the codification of what a member state can ask of you in a survey is really important, because, it's to stop that Jimmy Crow type sliding scale of elimination, to justify a bigger intervention. And I think that's a really important thing to keep an eye on. And in fairness, I think there's a good effort to deal with that at the Commission. I think the other one is, the other important aspect of it for us is that, it codifies the type of quality we need to be delivering as fixed wire, what's being demanded of us, and then the question is, can you do it? If you can do it, great. You're commercially providing a service, and if you're doing that in a rural area, you're providing a commercial service, unsubsidized, and you're meeting that standard, and that's great. Wear that badge with honor, And then there's the other side of it as well. Then if there's a gap, can you plug that gap in the time horizon available? Is that feasible for you to do that? And then if it's not, then what are the tools that can be used to actually resolve that problem? But if we have an opportunity there to engage with this, it hasn't been done in about 8 years, and it's really important. And these are the rules that will be used to either enhance your business or potentially overbuild it. And so there's upside risk and a considerable amount of downside risk. So it'll be good to engage with the Commission on it, because I think they've been working on it for a few years, since early 2020, and and I have to say, there was a number of surveys done, and I could safely say that there was I did submit feedback, and and so did other ISPs in Ireland, and I have to say, I would certainly get the impression that some of the issues we were concerned about are being addressed. Are they being addressed fully? We're trying to work through it. We've got a couple of months to do it. So it's running from the 19th of November to the 11th of February. And I just think it's really important that if people want to reach out and have a chat with me and discuss it, or if they could read the DG Comp website. So Greg will have the links in the comments below. But if you want to reach out, tom.smyth@wirelessconnect.eu. I'd like to, particularly if you see something that you're worried about, or if you have experience of where a member state ran a consultation and it didn't, that there was some issues with it that you felt were either unfair or it went really well. Certainly in my Irish experience of the consultation and mapping process, I would say the consultation one was flawed, but the mapping process was pretty unfair on fixed wireless operators. I can safely say that. But it was, I don't want to really get into that. The important part of what I'm saying here is that there are guidelines being reviewed. They're talking about achieving the political target. So, in fairness, the Commissioner are trying to balance, the political objective is a gigabit. That's a tall order for any operator. Gigabit down, but there's also rules so for instance there would have been these what we called white, grey and black areas. So a white area was that there was no operators. Traditionally, if I was to overly simplify it for the viewers, is that if there was no operators, let's say broadband operators in an area, that was a white area, and it was full intervention, but you have to identify those. So if you've got 1 million households in your country or your state, you need to assess which ones actually have broadband, which ones don't. And the ones that have broadband from 2 providers or more, they were traditionally called black. You could not ever intervene in them under any circumstance. Then there was grey, which was there's one operator there, and there's a potential that you may need to intervene in that. And that would be an operator that was acting monopolistically. So, huge connection charges for citizens and unfair installation or something like that. So in that case where the value for the taxpayer or the citizens wasn't being, or the connectivity objectives wasn't being met at the prices that one would expect to be, in average in the member state or in the union itself. So, so if people, if the average was, let's say, €30 a month, and then suddenly in this area they had really fast broadband, but they were being charged $300 a month each, that type of stuff. So in that case, there would be a justification to try and introduce competition to bring the prices down for the citizens that would be reflective of a functioning market elsewhere or a better regulated one.
So a question I have really quick before you move off is you were saying in a wide area that would be full intervention. What does that mean? Who's intervening?
So in an intervention, so there's interventions can take different forms. So for instance, a government body could say, we're from the government, we're here to help. Sorry,
how do they help?
No, but what you could do is they could roll out their own infrastructure, so it would be government owned and managed.
Is that a common thing?
Well, think of it like this.
I just look at the U.S. That doesn't exist.
It does. It does.
Yeah, no, that's FEMA's motto. We're here to help.
I'm talking about in the telecom industry.
Yeah, no, it's all private. Everybody lies to the government too.
So the FCC announced these rural broadband voucher programs. The Obama phone. Do you remember the Obama phones? Yeah, which I have to say, I suppose personally, not all state aid is good. Let's put it that way, and certainly not all interventions are good. Let me be very clear. And some of it I find is it's actually a social welfare check to corporate interests as opposed to for the citizens. So let me just get that out of the way. But and certainly, but it's dressed up as socialism and it's for the people, but realistically, it benefits, it does enrich sometimes.
So would that be common? It would they would pay some existing telecom to just build in there?
Well, no. To be fair, and the rules are quite how to describe it. It's quite sophisticated. You're talking about a 50-page document, 74-page document. Hundreds of paragraphs. The original one, anyway, and in this one, it's smaller, more concise, but they have they're more targeted in ways in what they're trying to do, and they're also in ways. And one of the downside risks for existing commercial operators is they're trying to, I think, make it easier for people to intervene. So for governments to intervene legitimately. So they're trying to make it easier for legitimate interventions to occur, but obviously there's downside risk for any commercial operator in that. So to answer your question, that now, 10 minutes later, sorry about that, Greg. So when an intervention, it can be a state body purchasing the infrastructure, raising finance, and controlling the measure on an open access basis for other operators. Other commercial operators.
Oh, so they'll put fiber in the ground and just lease it to
put fiber
commercial.
in the ground and then put the poles in, put the ducts, and then charge CenturyLink and AT&T a rental fee.
Gotcha. So
there's that side. That's one that's and what's good about that, I suppose, from a as I am a capitalist, but I also have a social conscience. What I do like about that is you have public resources going into a publicly owned asset, which is kind of nice, from a taxpayer point of view. You kind of go, okay, well, there's value and it could be extracted, and in a few years' time, it could actually make, on a long game, it can actually make it back for the taxpayer. In terms of the public-private partnerships, this is one where I have to say sometimes I wrestle with the value proposition, gap-funded models. So, just to give you an example, in Ireland, it's a 95% capital state aid intensity. So it's 95%, up to 95% of the capital cost of the project is being funded by the taxpayer. And at the end of it, it'll be owned by the private operator for 5% equity, So sometimes, you kind of look at it and you go, Jesus, sorry, but that's another, it's another day's work. But sometimes I think when the state aid intensity and the public-private partnership, there's more private partnership in it, in terms of equity. I think there's a value there. But that said, now, to be fair as well, look, the question is, if you said, hey, I'm going to go to all these unprofitable parts of the country and I'm going to fiber them up, what bank would invest to give you that funds?
It's cost prohibitive.
So you're going to lose how many million for the first, so there is the gap funding model. So there is legitimate reasons for funding the gap. But it's just, I suppose, it's what's the return for the taxpayer can often be a question.
Gotcha.
That needs to be, but should be answered by, and that's another thing that's pretty good, is that they are improving the transparency requirements. I would say that the Irish MBP probably lacked transparency in that before the contract was signed, a lot of the documentation was redacted. So even the politicians who were trying to sign off on it and scrutinise it, they were looking at blacked out. You'd swear it was like the Bay of Pigs report on what happened, literally pages and pages of black text. They just used black highlighter. They didn't realize that it was the wrong color. So they were like, oh, here's all the important bits. Oh, sorry, it's blacked out. So, but it was pretty, so from that point of view, they've improved the transparency, but the rules, I suppose, are really important to try and grapple with. And just where I have an interest and where I think is interesting, as always, is where is it open to interpretation? What's the grey? Because, look, that's where you can innovate, but that can, so what's the loopholes, or what's the areas in which you could and that can be used for you or against you.
Yeah.
And if the rules are for, let's say, legitimate interventions, you want to keep them legitimate. And that's for me as a commercial operator in the market. That's what I want to see from the rules. And to be fair, I do think that a lot of them are a lot more clear. But I suppose, there's a black and white set of standards that we now need to meet, and we know what, rather than, let's say, here, tell us what you have, and then we'll tell you why you're not good enough, which is what can happen. And I've personally experienced that. It's not particularly pleasant, I have to say. And I certainly, from my own interest in it, I wouldn't like other companies in the European Union to experience what we experienced back home in that intervention, I have to say. And so that's why it's really important for fixed wireless or small broadband providers, regional ones who stepped in to address the digital divide, that you're familiar and understand your rights and responsibilities, because in ways we do have a responsibility to improve connectivity for our citizens. I mean, it's why I went into business. It's why probably you guys, got into broadband and found it interesting, was that you were actually helping connect people. It's a really good thing to do. And we do have a responsibility to play a positive role in that. But we also, as a commercial operator, you have to defend your interests as well, and give good feedback. And particularly when I do think the Commissioner made some really good effort in it, and I'm still considering it myself, and playing catch up, of course. But it, I think it's a document worth engaging with. And so if you guys can, if anyone is interested, please contact me. I'd like to discuss it. If you've experiences where you're worried about, or you thought was unfair, it's good to get that knowledge, so that we can prevent abuse of these schemes as well. Because effectively, in some ways, like the downside of all these interventions is that you have these commercial operators that are encouraged to address the digital divide, and then they go, okay, we're from the government, we'll take it from here. So long and thanks for the coffee. And so there's a situation there where then what you get. So no one objects to competition. I certainly wouldn't. But what you don't want is a situation where you're facing competition from people who would only compete if they were being heavily subsidized by the state. And if you can't get that subsidy, and then you're being asked to subsidize to compete against them from an infrastructure point of view, there's a fairness question there. So it's something that we need to deal with and grapple with.
Is that so? I'm curious. What's the call to action here? Is there a particular issue you're concerned about? Do you just want people to be more informed? Do you just need more eyeballs to look at this to see if you've missed anything, or like is? Well,
I think I think one, engage with it, look at the rules and see, compare the original rules with the new rules.
Is that a pretty big ask? Because you said the original rules were pretty massive, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys have like a TLDR on it somewhere where it like?
Too long didn't read.
Like a chart. Like here's what it said in the old. Here's the new line. Like pow 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 pow. Like side by side.
I think my life.
It might be hard if it's a complete rewrite.
I think TLDRs are the bane of our. Look, it's
because sometimes it's like if somebody just looks and they see that mountain, they'll be like, "No, I'm not interested in that." But if you can give them the TLDR, they could do some comparisons and see, "Oh, wait a minute, let me dig a little bit more in this."
One, understand the Annex 1 is very important from a standards point of view. Understand what the standards you as an investor in the market need to meet to stave off encroachment from a state-aided operator. So that's the selfish ask, okay? The other one is to find out where it's not that clear. And it's like, doesn't mean that I only have to do this, or doesn't mean I have to do this, And then is to ask the question of the Commission. You see, if there's grey area now, and in fairness, I think there's been a really good effort to actually really improve. And in fairness, the first ones were actually quite well written. There wasn't, but like everything, you do it. It was relatively new. It was part of a program of state aid modernization. It was difficult to. It was a new kind of field for them, and you effectively have a bunch of lawyers and people who may not necessarily build networks every day, trying to codify rules for intervening in a market. And no, don't get me wrong, the people I've engaged with are quite knowledgeable in the Commission and all that. And certainly any of the presentations I've seen, they're well thought out. And if you read the documents, you can see they're actually well considered. And so in ways it belies, I would actually say it's well worth a read. I would say that if you turn on the Microsoft, what I do is open them in Microsoft Word, and I read them, and I have your favorite Microsoft voice read the document to you. And it's, the punctuation is perfect, so it's like someone having a chat with you. And they're saying, hey, we want to intervene in the market. And they'll use all the inclinations for you and everything like that because the commas are all well put. And what they're trying to do is, and it's almost matter of fact. So it would take you about 2 or 3 hours to go through one document. But I guarantee you, every time you read it, you'll get a new insight. The other thing is, if you are reading any of these documents from my lawyer, I have a fantastic lawyer, Nigel Young, absolute genius. I just want to give him a shout out. But one of the things that he always said, now, Tom, when you're reading these things, you need to read the footnotes. So every time you see a superscript number, go down to that. So, and then that'll reference another document. And this is where it gets tricky, because now you have, hey, what we mean by this is, like, for instance, in Annex 1, they said you need to codify the network performance. You need to, in the mapping project, operators must provide data on the performance of their networks. And then there's a superscript 1, 2, and 3. And then it's like, okay, so you need to do ITU Y 1540. You need to do in BERIC 20. And then so you read those documents and it's like, that's what I mean. And it's, so there's, and so suddenly it becomes almost like a mind map of, but in order to fully understand it, and it's tricky, but the lawyer was saying, when you're reading the document, Tom, don't ignore the footnotes. You stop. He says, when you see the superscript, stop where you are, read the footnote, then go back up and continue and keep. So the document, it's and then the footnote, sometimes you'd be delighted to know references a court case in the European Commission or the European Court of Justice. And then so you have to read a judgment or find the paragraph that they're referring to. And usually it's a previous case law. So it's very rules-based. But to be fair, they're what they are actually, as a citizen who's not a lawyer, and trying to grapple with it, and these rules do affect you. And these rules can be used to enhance your business, or they can be used to destroy your business. If you don't engage them and you don't understand how to look at the rules to ensure that the rules are being followed in your member state, you need to understand them so that you can defend yourself. But also you need to understand them so that you can know what's your moonshot, what's your target for the next 10 years of your business, what's your investment plans. Because you do need to have credible investment plans. And they do try to deal, and in some ways, you have to remember that generally these are born, I think, and I didn't write these rules, but my experience was and I think it's similar in rural America as well. You've got your CenturyLinks, you've got your AT&Ts, which may have significant market power in your area, and so you don't have much choice. And because of that, sometimes the innovation is lacking, and investment is lacking. And so in ways these rules were codified to try and stop that monopolistic kind of sweating the assets behavior of significant market powers. That's reality. The problem is that when you're a small ISP who went in to address the digital divide and you're being overbuilt, the same tools that are being used to deal with, big corporate interests who are sweating their assets are also being used to squash you as a small investor in the market. So it's not intentional. No one intends to do that, but that can become a reality if you don't invest in your network, and two, if you don't defend your rights. So it's important to engage with that constructively, and if there is glaring gaps, because no one has a monopoly of wisdom on this, is to actually try and identify them and flag them so that they can be addressed before they're fully adopted. So that is the call to action: is yes, read the TLDRs, read them, but read the annex, there's, and for the technical people on this call, please get your business owners, the guys, or your business partners, the legal people, or the business people, the investor people, to actually grapple with this. And if you have the resources, obviously hire a decent solicitor, law firm to represent you and to analyze this for you. But certainly, and it is a challenge. Like when you have these small businesses that, would struggle just to invest in infrastructure and build their business organically. People like that don't generally have a high-powered, sophisticated law firm with a team of lawyers. One's with state aid, one's with competition, one with all these different disciplines that they need to be expert in. I was just lucky that for ours is that we had a lawyer who had a fixed wireless business himself, very bright, very intelligent, and actually had a keen interest in this stuff. And so and I have to say Nigel Young has been a fantastic assistance to my business. By just having that decent, high-quality legal advice. And I suppose that's, get good legal advice, but if you have this isn't for your run-of-the-mill conveyancing solicitor or attorney, sorry for this American side of things, but, this is generally for more, you need people who understand the state aid rules. And I can say this for someone who's been trying to grapple with it. I never thought I'd be reading Article 108, Paragraph 3 of the European Treaty, which, it's the notification of standstill obligation. I never thought I could do that. But yet I am in trying to protect the interests of my business.
Yeah. Just from what you describe, it makes me wonder if this would actually stifle innovation, stifle company. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if I'm a smallish size wireless ISP or broadband provider, and I see this and it just looks insurmountable, maybe I just try and sell my business, right? And then you start getting M&As, and the big telecoms just start Pac-Manning up these smaller ones because it's like, this is too much trouble, I don't want to compete. Do you think that's like some kind of a threat? Like in these scenarios?
It's not because of the guidelines, not because of the rules. It's because, I suppose, the game. What I mean by that is that if you have a member state and the department in the member state has a particular opinion of a sector, that can inform. Like I know of people being in meetings with officials and the officials saying, there's a train coming down the track, get off the track, kind of thing. Now, the state aid guidelines explicitly prohibit that type of behavior. What the intervention is meant to be is a carrot and a stick for people who don't invest. It's not meant to be a stick saying, don't invest because we're going to invest. The whole idea is to actually wake up the commercial sector, particularly the big corporate ones, to say, if you don't invest, we'll overbuild you. And, if you think about it, you all remember the long distance phone call charges and, or mobile broadband providers charging you per megabyte download. You could almost say, some of the times you would think extortionate type pricing. So that type of stuff, the rules are being there to just try and cut that crap out and try and improve the connectivity. So so if done right, state aid is to promote investment, not to stifle it. That said, if a member state and their officials decide they want to intervene at any cost, then that's a whole different ballgame, and then you come into the stifling, and you do come into. But that said, the only thing I would say is my own personal experience. I'm very bullish about my network. I am investing in it, despite being heavily competed against through subsidized competition. But that's because I'm an engineer and not a businessman. So it's kind of, I can kind of see that if I want to compete, my technology has to be good. That's the reality. But that said, if you were a business person, it could be stifling, but it's not intended to be. And if it was done right, so if the rules are followed in spirit and letter, you wouldn't have that stifling. It would be like, hey, these are the standards. Do you meet them? Here's how you get to it.
Right. I just wonder if it's like not financially viable to get to those standards. Like if you could show on paper, it's like, this doesn't work out. Like my people are so spread out that to invest that much in the infrastructure, it would never work out for me business wise. So yeah, like what do you do in that scenario?
Well, what do you do in that scenario? Well, look, that's a commercial decision. So in a commercial decision, the idea is that if you don't meet that target or you can't meet that target commercially, you don't invest. That would be, I suppose, you're acting like a market operator. You're actually making a commercial decision not to lose money, and you're entitled to do that as any business in the European Union or EU. In fact, I think it's encouraged. You don't make decisions that make you lose money. But in terms of if you can't meet that, then there's a legitimate need for a member state to intervene to assist your fellow citizens get connectivity, and that's okay. Like for instance, for me, if the National Broadband Plan in Ireland was sized appropriately, I'd have no objection to it. Like, commercially, if I can't serve a client, hell yeah, give them fiber, right? It doesn't affect me. But if I've invested, and then you're saying on the premise that because, inverted commas, Tom Smyth can't provide 30 meg broadband at 6 meg up, we're going to give this guy 5,500 plus change per premises passed in my area that I've already passed and connected. Yeah, it's a problem. So.
Well, I just wonder, like, say I'm able to meet the guidelines in most areas, except for two small pockets where I've got 20 sheep herders out there that maybe watch Netflix. That's it. That's all they do. Or maybe they watch, they check email. So honestly, they'd be perfectly happy getting 10 megs down. But say I can only get 250 megs to them. Does that mean, like, what does that mean? Like if I can't meet in all areas and it's just some little BS pocket.
In that case, so there's two aspects of this. And so we have to be mindful. And as a technologist, how to put it here? When my business partner, Michael Cotter, set up the business, first of all, he set it up because he couldn't get broadband in Burstkin. And the best that we could hope for was, I think, dial-up. So 14 kilobits per second. And we innovated and we put fixed wireless out and we got 1 megabit. Now that was in 2005. So we had 1 megabit broadband. And we bought 1 megabit backhaul, I remember, and we sold that 10 times over. And then we went to 2 megs and so on and so forth. And now we have, 40 gigabits of net northbound capacity and 30 gigabits southbound capacity. And then we have, and we're delivering about between 100 and 250 megs per client. That's what we're doing at the moment. So, we've scaled in the past 14, 15 years, and it's kind of nice to see that progress. It'd be nice to be recognized by our state-aided authorities, the state-aided authorities. But anyway, but it is, but that's what we did. Now, the reason I'm coming back to your question,
yeah,
promise.
You're bringing it home, I know.
But someone somewhere probably thought 14 kilobits per second back was enough for a farmer who was just going to look at Google and try and find, so we don't know what will be happening in 10 years' time. And the reality is that the idea of the state-aided stuff is to improve connectivity for situations, to make things possible that weren't possible before. And that's a really good thing. And so, like, you have remote telemedicine. Let's say that farmer, unfortunately, has a cow that is not feeling well, and he can take his phone and he's on Wi-Fi, and he can do a Zoom call with his vet and say, I'll give you a laugh. Like, I remember my dad has a small farm. When I say small farm, 37.5 acre farm. So, and it's when you put in the half acre, it's a small farm. It's kind of like it's important, But he was in Rome on holidays, and there was a cow making this weird sound. So I was looking after the cattle, and I went, Jesus, I've never heard a cow make a moo like that. It was weird, like it was like roaring all the time. It wasn't like a normal one. So I remember ringing my dad, going, "Hey, Dad, there's a cow this weird sound," and I held the phone up. So maybe I was foretelling, telemedicine, but my dad, being the cow whisperer, was able to identify that that was normal for that weird cow, and that he wasn't in danger of death, and I wouldn't have a dead bullock on my hands, which was great. And so I suppose what I'm saying is, gigabit, the objective is to give that so that people have the option whether they want it or not at the moment. So there's an objective there, and it's a noble one. And broadly, I'd be supportive of it. But what I'd be saying is, if people have, and I suppose selfishly, my thing would be, if people entered the market to address the digital divide, they need assistance. And if they can't meet the standards that are being set, that can only be done through commercial intervention, and that they're now being asked to face competition that would only happen because of state aid, that there should be some sort of compensation. Like, to give you an idea, in Ireland, so the state aid measure can overbuild our network, apparently, because we're not good enough, right? And then the person who's the state aid measure in the future could claim commercial encroachment compensation. So he's allowed to be compensated for commercial operators encroaching on him, but we don't have any compensation for it, or any, and for that it's a bit, I suppose, in ways I would say a bit unfair and regrettable. But that's for another day. But like, I suppose in ways, but the objective is to improve connectivity. And look, here's the thing: people can work from home. You can improve your quality of life. Like, do you go to the office much, Greg, or do you work from home?
I'm a 100% remote employee.
You're a 100% remote employee, and that has been facilitated by a local innovator, I hope, in your area that provided connectivity, or is
it's an incumbent?
One of the big,
yeah,
it's an incumbent, yeah. But look,
but that's the way it works in our cities. Like, in most major cities, the incumbent owns it, and they won't encroach on each other's territory. So it's kind of
it's not commercially. It's funny because there's a bit, there can be a bit of a turf war at the moment we're seeing in cities in Ireland, but realistically, like, that innovation allows that, and now you get to spend more time with your lovely kids, your beautiful wife, and that's awesome,
Well, as I like to say, I'm actually starting to like them, so I think I'm getting Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, no, they they drain your energy. But like I give you I give you a funny story about my daughter. Like I remember one time there was a storm and there was an issue with masts got wind damage. And so I had to go down, and I wasn't going to climb the mast. I was there more like the water boy, make sure the person climbing the mast would be fully hydrated. So and provide moral support and say, you're doing a great job there. And but I remember just saying to my daughter, she was like 5, and she was like, Dad, don't go, because it was late in the evening, And I said, I have to go. And she goes, but why? And I said, and of course, Sophie loves bajeczkas, right, which is basically Polish for a cartoon. And I said, because the people in Tipperary can't see a cartoon. And you kids like you have no cartoons. They can't see them at the moment if I don't go. And she was just like, okay, go. It's really cool, like, And, it's something that's, it's that empathy. And I suppose in ways it's not just a cartoon. It's a way for people to connect. So, yeah, some people use it for Netflix, but there's huge capabilities, and like our capacity during the pandemic is our business has grown in the pandemic, and I would like to have grown our business through a more more humane circumstances. But it was important, to provide remote working facilities for people, and what people are innovating across Europe and America, people who do this type of stuff to keep people to be able to work from home safely and keep connected for their mental health, be able to talk to people, be able to talk to awesome people like Greg. People be watching this video going, Jesus, Tom talks an awful lot. And that's fine. But, it's what we do. And it's why we're doing it, So, and I have to say, like, the team working with us, they worked through the pandemic. It was kind of, changing work practices, drilling holes into a house, throw it in the cable, ask them to pass the cable out, crimping it outside, put the router in place, handed it back through the window. That was, we had to adapt to be able to keep people being connected, and keep our guys and our staff safe, when they were on the road. And I have to say, just a shout out to the lads and all of the installing engineers across the world who have been actually rolling out this stuff. Even my competitors. Grudgingly, my competitors. No, but people connecting people. We need more of that. And it's an awesome thing to be in.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, it feels like it was so long ago. Yeah, it's hard to kind of remember those early days. The only reminder now, well, because I'm in Texas, so there's no more pandemic. There's no more COVID here. We're just back to normal. But in the long ago, I remember what it was like. It's weird, man. It's strange days. I do watch a lot of British television, so it's still pretty real of it. Like, you guys have some really interesting commercials, like state-funded commercials talking about COVID and doing the right thing and protection measures and how you guys need to take care of each other. And it's like, wow, that's fascinating. We don't do anything over here. We just have, we had Old Navy commercials where people were wearing masks. Like that's the closest thing we had. So I thought Europe's approach, or at least the British television and stuff like that, it's very different. They have a very different outlook on things.
Well, I think there was an example, I suppose, of one of the first things we did, in Europe, which was really good, was they collectively procured vaccines, and which meant that you didn't have small countries trying to bid against bigger countries, trying to bid against other countries. And so what they said is, right, with 500 million vaccines we need, who wants to give us the vaccine? So it was done and that was led by the European Commission, and it was very positive, and it meant that and I suppose, look, in the American pharmaceutical industry stepped up as well. I mean, you've got Pfizer BioNTech, you've obviously AstraZeneca. There was some controversies there with supply, but yeah, it was. And look, I'm vaccinated. I got my booster there. Although I was kind of wondering why do we need a third one, to be honest. But then when the third one was different, so I got AstraZeneca 1 and 2, and then I got my third, which was Pfizer BioNTech. So I was glad to get it, but I would have been wondering if I was getting the third one, why would I need the third of the same one? But yeah, I'm kind of relieved to have it now. I think rich folks need to start stepping up and providing vaccines to poorer countries because, this new Omicron, however you pronounce it, variant. But I think.
All right, well, guys, I guess we're going to stick a fork in it. Unbeknownst to all of the listeners, we've cut out 15-ish minutes, maybe longer, of diatribe that we sort of went on down a black hole that shall never see the light of day.
Yeah, we didn't even get to the networking stuff.
Tom Smyth, this isn't the first time I've had to edit conversations with you, but I have a feeling it won't be the last either.
No, I think it's always good to discuss politics of the day, affairs of the state. As Shakespeare used to say, the discussing affairs of state. I know, it was interesting. Guys, I missed you, and I have to say, Greg, Mike, and all the guys, and Colin, I really do appreciate the work you've been doing to showcase different technologies and ideas, and I appreciate the opportunity to just connect with some of the European ISPs that would be affected by that state and stuff, which is really important.
And one last time, if you want those folks to get a hold of you, what's your preferred method?
Tom.Smyth@wirelessconnect.eu. My mobile number, if you want to talk to me, is +353 87 619 3172. Is that called doxing or something like that? Look, we could, but yes, I would really appreciate anyone who's interested or has experience in this to just reach, just to give me a shout and we can discuss it. But certainly familiarize yourself with them, and if you have an opinion, voice it and engage constructively with it, because it is important and it is about connecting. Ultimately, these people are trying to connect the unconnected in our communities, and it is a noble cause and it needs to be done right. And we have an opportunity to actually talk about the very rules that will be applied for or against us, or maybe
have some say in the things that are going to be placed upon you. It's this is probably going to be your last opportunity to do it for a while, right?
Exactly, for the next, I would say 8 or 9 years anyway. So if you're not in, you can't win. Everyone who submits will get a teddy. No, but I do appreciate your time, guys. And
okay, well, Mr. Collin Z, if folks wanted to interface with you out on the internet, how would you prefer them to do that?
Probably on the Slack channel for now.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm on the Slack channel too from time to time.
Every 6 months or so.
Yeah, you're probably getting caught up in the 10,000 issue.
No, I do get caught up with the 10,000 messages. We gotta. Yeah, but so look, if I don't reply quickly, email me. Sorry.
No worries. All right, you can get me, Greg, at gregsoul.com is my email address. You can go to gregsoul.com where I regularly blog again. That's new since the last time I talked to you. I blog all the time now. If you guys have any questions, comments, please keep them coming. If you want to hear more from Tom Smyth, let us know about that too. I'd be really curious. All those closet Tom Smyth fans, you guys got the lurkers. You got to come out of the woodworks and let us know about it.
That'd be one for your secondary podcast.
Yeah, maybe.
we could do a slightly more unusual. We could do a kind of Joe Rogan kind of format type.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I actually, believe it or not, Tom, I've started a different podcast where I just have conversations with people. It's more about, I guess, me working through my hang-ups and problems through other people. It's interesting. So it's my therapy, but I figure it out through other people. And I've talked to a guy named Jimmy Ogle, and I think I said maybe 3 things in there. I bet you could give him a run for his money. I'm willing to bet. I bet you could only allow me to say 2 things. That'd be pretty fun.
We could do a fight to the death.
All right.
No, but like, it is important. It is something I'm trying to work on. Is say less. My life coach, James Kelly, has been really helpful to me. But I suppose there was a lot to say. There was a lot of stuff to unpack on this one.
No,
so
no worries. No worries.
To Colin and Greg on this one. But I'm always apologizing. But
You should have been Canadian. All right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Colin. I'm going to click stop on the record real quick.